good evening. What do you get when you get the biggest gathering of soccer minds to talk about everything that's happening in the Premier League? I don't know, but today you're going to get us three analysing everything. What a disaster it will be. Oh, only kid. It's going to be good fun. It's the American Scouser TV EPL panel show where we look at different points of view than our usual Liverpool-oriented analyses. I'm joined tonight by Glenn again. Glenn, it's good to see you again.
Great to see you, Mackie.
The only Brentford fan in Iowa and probably the only Brentford fan in this continent, probably. And then Jamie, first time for us two to be on the same show. How are you?
Doing well, thank you.
I'm going to gather that Cole Palmer FC means you're a Chelsea fan.
It does, unfortunately, for my son.
It's not. There was great Chelsea teams before they got all.
You've got to run.
Yeah, you got even before all the money. There was some legendary Chelsea teams, Chopper Harris and all of that lark, which I'm well into, being the historian that I am. But no games this week to analyse. It's international week. It's let's fob off the pores and give the Millwall fans and the Chorley fans a chance to bring their flags out and then wander around supporting England because they don't get to have European football, like Brentford may do if they continue the way they go with Thomas Frank, and with Chelsea and Liverpool do regularly. And a big hello to Sir Z and BX Gunner 81. Probably their age. Who knows? I don't know. But what we are going to do is, because we are a third-ish of the way through the season, we'll do a little report card on our teams before we look at the fixtures for the weekend. There's at least one juicy one, and then one that involves all of our teams and how it may impact the upcoming season. But we are going to look at, we're going to give the Liverpool one as well as Brentford and Chelsea. But we've seen enough, I think, boys. Do you agree at this point of the season to know how our team is going? Not necessarily where it's going to end up, but you can get a good taste of how your season is going. So I'll start just because it's Liverpool, and Liverpool are top of the league, and it's very obvious that you can't give Arne Slot and Liverpool anything less than an A if you're a Liverpool fan right now. Because the expectation was a season of transition after a legendary manager leaves, and yet this guy with less hair than me and a more impenetrable accent comes in and has us flying 5 points on top of the table. I think, if I remember correctly, top of the Champions League table, which doesn't really mean anything because that's the most convoluted thing ever, but we're still top nonetheless. And so what we're going to talk about tonight for both of all three of our clubs is, the season so far, the strengths that you've seen from your team, what the weaknesses are, who has been your standout player, and who has been your most disappointing. So for Liverpool, obviously, everything's gone swimmingly great. We were disappointed in not getting players in the transfer market, but it's worked out well for us so far, bar the Nottingham Forest game, which they've been blasting everybody else away as well. They've been a revelation so far this season, so it doesn't feel as bad as it did then. But I think everybody would agree in the Premier League that the strengths of Liverpool are basically Mo Salah and the phenomenality he brings to Liverpool Football Club. He's just a really difficult player to play against, and more importantly, probably a really difficult player to play against when he's feeling happy, which he didn't seem to be the last 2 seasons. And then, obviously, he's now the most important player, but the biggest disappointment, it's not for me, because Liverpool should not be buying Italian players, but it's Chiesa, made of glass, him and Blondie. For anybody who's old enough to remember that. So as we talk about what we want to do is I want to get your guys' interpretations of Liverpool's season so far. We'll start with you, Jamie, as perennial title rivals and trophy rivals for the last 2 decades.
I don't think you can disagree with your assessment too much. A plus if we're giving partial grades as well. I think Liverpool, the team has always been solid. So Slot was he was interpreting a good team, or inheriting a good team, should I say. And it was, are they going to play for him? Are they going to fit the system? Like, how much are they going to fall back before they potentially take a step forward? The seamless transition, I think, is on the wish list of every Man United fan right now. What if we could do what Liverpool just did? And
let's bear in mind they can't because they're Man United. That's why they're Man United.
Exactly. I think Liverpool, the style of play, a little more controlled than in years prior under Klopp. But I think, Mo Salah has been phenomenal this year. You've never been out of a game. It's been interesting to see which player he's preferred compared to how Klopp would play. But with our England hat on, it's been really interesting and great to see Curtis Jones flourish under this new system and new manager. He's had a great start to the season. So I'm also aware Liverpool haven't had their down patch yet, but you would certainly rather have points in the bag approaching the Christmas window than come off 4 defeats like Man City, thinking, oh, maybe we'll get a few wins together. So Liverpool have been phenomenal. I think you couldn't have expected you couldn't hope for anything better. It's the top of every Liverpool fan's Christmas list, and I would be interested to see how you think the rest of the season is going to play out. But I'll let Glenn give his assessment before.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, and I think I can't say much more on the past so far this season. I think you've both nailed it. It's been incredibly impressive, and as he says, the clean sheets like that really is the difference between the new manager and Klopp. It just seems to be that defensive solidity. What I am very interested to see is, in the next week and a half, 2 weeks, Liverpool obviously have this incredibly tough run. You've got Southampton away, sure, should be a pretty straightforward win. Although, as we know in this division, it's a cliche, but there's no easy wins. Think about some of the upsets we've seen in just the last few weeks. Bournemouth knocking over anyone.
To be fair, there's Everton.
Well, we'll see. We'll see about that. We'll talk about that later. But you go, away at Southampton, so away games are never easy, regardless of who it is. Then it's a big crunch match, of course, in the Champions League with Madrid, and a lot of neutrals will be excited to be watching that. And then it's what could be a huge game for the title already, which is Liverpool Man City, December 1st. And then you go to what I think is possibly the hardest place to go to in the country, which is St. James's Park, which is Newcastle. And Brentford never like going there because there's a really hostile atmosphere. It's great quality fans. So what I'm interested to see, is the coming month, because I think, as you both said, it's incredibly impressive. Tactically, he's been astute. He seems to be a great motivator. He's got the most out of players that have been on the fringes before, such as Curtis Jones. Been brilliant to see him thrive and relish this kind of more pivotal role he's been given in this new system. And I just love the Liverpool squad. Obviously Klopp and the behind-the-scenes team have laid the groundwork, but when you can rotate players like Salah, Diaz, Gakpo, Nunez, there's goals, there's direct players, there's aggressive wingers. You've got so much going on there. And as another one in the comments said, it's just been injuries seem to be potentially not necessarily catching up with you, because the replacements, right? How good's Kelleher looked? I know he's busy against England, but how good has he looked and assured in that? People have said he's probably the best backup goalkeeper in the division, and I wouldn't disagree. But, players like, Elliott, Chiesa's hard to say. He hasn't obviously had any impact yet, but Jota's a key clinical finisher for you guys. So it is going to be interesting to see how he juggles those injuries alongside this crunch month of fixtures for you guys. Like, what an exciting 2 weeks, but also what a daunting 2 weeks for you guys.
Let me ask you this before we move away from Liverpool, because it's not the Liverpool show, but for Jamie, from a different perspective from both of you, Jamie being a fan of a club that has had access to resources for a long time, Glenn being a fan of a club that has to be careful of the resources. The January transfer window opens. Liverpool can't strengthen where they are from a position possibly of being a good number of points ahead if things pan out the way you would hope they would pan out for a Liverpool fan. Does that make you apprehensive, Jamie, as a Chelsea fan? Because Maresca's doing good stuff right now. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was a low bar probably for him to come in, really, but he is doing the job that everybody thought Potter would do. For example, you're playing a very attractive style of football. It's kind of coming together sometimes, and then you can see the uncertainty in the players. But you're up there and you're making noise, which I would assume when we get to talk about Chelsea, be something Chelsea fans would have liked. But as a Chelsea fan, do you think the idea that Liverpool, that slot could reinforce what's already 5 points ahead, kind of makes things a little bit boring for everybody else?
I don't think it's boring. I mean, Glenn just mentioned the tough month Liverpool have, and obviously the January transfer window comes after that, so it will be a good opportunity should Liverpool falter. But as fixtures stack up, injuries happen. I think a really good thing for Slot is that he'll have had 6 months with his team by then. He will have intimately known what he likes, what he doesn't like, and opportunities for the squad, potentially with the Liverpool backroom staff evaluating potential signings as well. So we'll be able to go in and say, here are my 3 targets, pick one, something like that. He'll have an idea of who he wants, who can strengthen. Don't love when someone comes into a team and just says, here's my shopping list, bit of a Mourinho, get me these 5 players, and then you've got potential chemistry issues. Are they going to strengthen? Or are they going to hurt the team? Suddenly it's, this guy cost 100 million. Now there's a lot of focus on why aren't they in the team, and there's just pressure you don't need. So I think it's not just an open checkbook in January, and many teams do not buy well in January. They kind of waste their money, Chelsea being top of that list. But I think it's an opportunity, especially if you have injuries. And I can't see Slot, based on how he was in the summer, bringing in too many players. But I think 1 or 2 could be really astute additions to the squad that will only strengthen you.
I just reminded there, I have to check the name again. Just when you say about, Mourinho bringing in players with chemistry issues, the first thing I just thought was Adrian Mutu. He had the worst chemistry issues of all.
I had a Mutu shirt. He got sent off and scored a couple of goals in his first 2 games. It's like, great. Red cards and goals. Love him.
Graham, from a different perspective, for Brentford to be a team that has to, squeeze the most out of the resources you have, does it make you envious of clubs like Liverpool and Chelsea who can identify an issue and then just go and buy a replacement for that issue? Or do you value the fact that somebody like Thomas Frank can look at what he has and say, we've got an academy player who can fill that spot, or there's a cheap player in Norway, nobody knows them yet, but they're going to be fantastic and we're going to get them? Like, what's the perspective from a fan of a club that doesn't have access to the riches that the top 6 do?
Yeah, definitely the latter for me. I mean, we have to make our resources stretch. And it means that sometimes we need to take gambles on players that other clubs won't touch, maybe for injury reasons, right? So 2 great examples of that in recent years, Christian Norgard, and this season, and as a spoiler for my section, he's one of my players of the season so far, Mikael Damsgaard. And I mean, I know a lot of us saw him knock a free kick into the top corner against England a couple of Euros ago, but he was extremely injury prone, had some issues with his shins, I think, and it took him a couple of seasons to actually really integrate himself into the Brentford team and into the Premier League. And the faith we've showed in him, the trust, the patience has, given us such an incredible creative force this season. He's really taken the Eriksen position by the scruff of the neck and looks so fantastic right now. And yeah, I'll talk more about him when we're thinking about Brentford specifically. But I used him as an example to illustrate this point, is that, we can't go out and buy, for example, a fully fit Eriksen, when he's thriving at Tottenham or something. The reason we had Eriksen is, of course, we're taking a gamble on his fitness in a very strange situation. But again, that paid dividends for us as well. So for me, it's actually kind of exciting to play this Moneyball way and look for these maybe less sexy signings, these less recognized signings. We really have to work on the margins, right? And maybe we're going to dip into markets that other teams won't, looking at the Danish Premier League, looking at, Italian clubs that aren't the Milan teams and others, that we have to look that level below. And for me, actually, it's super exciting to unearth a gem. And we're not going to buy, Brentford do not have the resources to buy Premier League ready-made top 10 players. Those players are going to be snapped up by the 10 clubs above us, the 15 clubs above us. But what it does make us do is be really savvy with our money. And it's really exciting when we sign. And we've got this, we've still got a lot of young players in and around the first team now who are looking really good. And in terms of, some of those players, Carvalho hasn't really had a chance yet. He's looked very creative and technically sound when he's been on the pitch, but we haven't figured out where to put him into the system. So I think it'll be probably season 2.
We know that pain, Glenn. We know that pain.
But I do trust that he's a good signing. I've not seen anything bad from him. He scored a great overhead kick in the League Cup a couple of weeks ago. I like him. And Van den Berg's done really admirable. So he's been kind of positioned at right back because we have a lot of injuries with our fullbacks this season. And he's done really, really well. You know, we would prefer to pay him at centre back. Obviously, going forward, he's not going to offer much. Bombing forward, overlapping, that's not his role, right? He doesn't have the pace. But I do think he's been a really impressive signing. And yeah, I mean, we've shown that we're I can't wait to talk about this a little bit later, but we've shown that we're at least a balanced Premier League side. And some of those signings, they're both signings for the future as well, right? We're spending money, don't get me wrong, but there are players who can't quite get in the Liverpool first team, but they're still gems. They were in the Liverpool system for a reason. You guys aren't hanging on. You didn't buy Carvalho from Fulham for fun. He's clearly a technically gifted player. It's just about finding a team that's willing to be patient. And I think Thomas Frank is really good at that.
Jamie, before we go to Chelsea, do you have any more thoughts on the January transfer market? Because it could be a make or a breaker for a lot of teams, couldn't it?
Yeah, and it can also unsettle as well. Slot's done a really good job getting performances out of Trent Alexander-Arnold, who has in years past been the weak link in your defense. I think he's been really good this year. But with rumblings about Madrid and whatnot, like that doesn't necessarily help a team's chemistry and keep the team focused on what is a really important time of year for Liverpool. So he may stay put and go nowhere and the team will be fine. But the last thing you need is to lose someone. Then you've only got Bradley and then there's an injury there and you've got to flex players out of position. And then you're kind of running on fumes till the end of the season. So like you said, make or break. And the beauty of it is that you can pull a rabbit out of the hat, but also when you are at the top, other teams are going to be swinging as well. You could find that Man City ad, you could find the Arsenal ad, and suddenly more resources they're coming at you. So I think it's a potential game changer.
Brian has, but the question on everybody's lips always when it comes to Chelsea. But let's talk about Chelsea, Jamie. What do you think your strengths so far have been under Maresca? You know, he did a great job bringing Leicester back up, but Leicester's been a club that's been, you know, teetering on the brink of going back to what they used to be before, 2016 and all of that. But what do you think of the strengths, or where do you think your weaknesses are? And then your most important player so far this season. I mean, he's probably in your little headline underneath there, and I don't think anybody would disagree with that. And then who's been the most disappointing, especially, I'm not kind of being flippant about it, but with the amount of players Chelsea have bought over the years and who you've had a chance to see, there's surely one that you expected more from.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start with the weakness. Our weakness is that we're defensively poor. We ship too many goals. We have 8 goalkeepers and none of them are good. So it's a bad place to start. And we're
probably not put them all in the goal at the same time.
Yeah, we're not solid enough that 1 goal lead is never enough. In years past with Mourinho, score and sit back, park the bus, knowing you're not going to ship a goal. That's not the new Chelsea. But I'd say one of the most exciting things this season is seeing Maresca come in and handle fan expectations and handle the size of the squad. You saw Potter and Pochettino struggle with the sheer size of Chelsea's squad. And while I don't love players that I really enjoy watching, Gallagher leaving the club and Chilwell being set out to pastures new, Maresca decided that he wanted to work with X amount of players and that he was gonna go forward. I think fans were generally trusting, say, okay, let's see what you can do. But in the back of our minds, skeptical, knowing how Chelsea like to replace our manager every week. And I think we've been impressed. He's managed the fan expectations well. He has said this is a transitional year. This is a transitional squad. No one in ownership is saying to him, title fight, Champions League. And yet we find ourselves in 3rd position in the league. It's a very tight league. I think Man United are only a few points behind us and they're in about 13th. So it's one of the more competitive and compact leagues I've seen at this point in a season. But when it comes to players, I think Cole Palmer stand out. I think that would be captain obvious to say Cole Palmer is the most exciting player we have. He's been quiet the past 2 games in big games, to be fair. But players I would say have been instrumental. Caicedo has been really, really good, and especially he keeps getting better and better, having more and more of an influence, especially in bigger games. And it's great to see Romeo Lavia back in the squad. He adds that little bit of extra class on the ball. Neither are kind of distributors of the ball, but they work very well together, which is what Fernandes and Caicedo struggle with. Those 3 obviously could have been the Liverpool midfield if transfers had gone the other way. But they would be my 2 standouts for Chelsea, Lavia and Caicedo, although Jackson's come on strong as well, so great to see that too. Weakness, I'd say Enzo Fernandez. You can't. It's difficult to ignore the price tag. I think lots of Chelsea fans would have far preferred us to ship him off for 35 million, even though we bought him for 100 and plus, and keep Gallagher, who was a real value add and club captain. But yeah, Enzo Fernandez and also Mudryk. We spent a ton of money on Mudryk because we were trying to beat Arsenal to the signing, and he is incredibly fast. He's really exciting when he plays against Europa Conference League minnows. But when he's up against a Premier League organized defense, his football IQ of 0 shows through, and he's learning. He's a slow study. Thankfully, we have him on an 8-year contract, so by the time it is the end of that contract, he might be all right. Be a 30-year-old citizen by then. In terms of league, our grade, I'd love to hear what you guys think, but I would give us a B+. I think we're still early days, much better than a lot of Chelsea fans thought, especially after we finished the year so well last season with Pochettino. No one was happy that we changed gears, and especially when Maresca was the person chosen. None of the Leicester fans seemed too sad that he was leaving, so it seemed as though Chelsea had overpaid or stretched too far for someone again, just like we have in the transfer market. But a very promising start. I think the past 3 years we've been around 10th at this point, and to see ourselves in the Champions League places where I'd say we belong is really encouraging. Obviously, it's tight, and we're heading into a really congested period. And just I hope Chelsea sell during the window instead of bring in more and more players. That would be absolute disaster. The exception of which would be perhaps a goalkeeper. If we can give someone 4 goalkeepers and maybe they give us a good one, that would be nice. But overall, B+ for Chelsea, and I'm really excited about what the latter 2/3 of the season they're going to hold for us.
Let me ask you this quickly before we go to Glenn's thoughts on Chelsea, Jamie. Because I watched a lot of the Championship last year, and just for funds, I liked to go into the Leicester forum, because when Brendan Rodgers was there, it was fun to watch them, because they're not a great set of fans. They turn on their managers like that. But one of the complaints that they did have was that Maresca doesn't change. He's a lot like Big Ange at Spurs in the sense that he has a way of playing. And if that plan isn't working, he'll just try and do that plan more. Have you seen evidence of that? And if so, does it worry you for when games come thick and fast?
Yes and no would be my answer. I've seen him move Palmer around the various the channels in the front, move players around, switch wingers in order to try and unlock something. He's also been no stranger to rotating the squad. We sometimes find Malo Gusto and Reece James playing at left back for God knows why when we have Ben Chilwell sitting there. But he has been willing to change. I think sometimes his in-game management, we'll see substitutions happen a little late, or fans are dying for a positive option. He brings on Mudryk, and you're like, well, not that option, because playing with a passenger isn't something that is it's a luxury in the Premier League. So despite that, he hasn't been as rigid as I had been led to believe. So I've seen him change, and whether that's the players changing kind of around him and him just going with it, I don't know. But we haven't really got a leader on the pitch right now, given how young the squad is. So I doubt that's the case. As kind of happened when we won the Champions League and the senior players basically manage the team under Roberto Di Matteo. That's not happening now, and it seems like he is really in tune with this young squad and developing them. So that's encouraging to see as well. Like, God forbid a coach would actually improve players.
I know, I'm gonna go to Glenn now, but just that kind of makes that decision to let Conor Gallagher go, because he seemed like a leader, didn't he?
He did, yeah. I very much wish he stayed, and I think his performances at Atletico Madrid and then again for England have shown that wasn't a flash in the pan season. He is a quality footballer and a leader, which we're lacking.
Glenn, you've been nice and patient there now for a bit, so you get the floor for a fair while. So before we start talking about Brentford, it was never going to stay the situation because Chelsea have money, but it looked at some point in the last 2 seasons like Chelsea and Brentford would be almost in the same bracket of clubs in the Premier League, competing for those European spaces. Maybe not the Champions League if things hadn't gone well for Chelsea, but certainly the Europa Conference and the Europa League. How does it make you feel to see clubs, that they're struggling and they're showing that they are human, that all the money in the world doesn't help you if you're somewhat mismanaged, and to look at the club doing what they're doing right now and to go, like, as much as the money ball thing works for Brentford, I really wish somebody would come in and just give us some money, some benefactor, so you could compete, because you have a lot of good things in place at Brentford, don't you? Which we'll talk about. But to see a club like Chelsea struggle for a bit and to know you can't take advantage, does that like stick in your craw a little bit, or do you just accept it as the way of things?
No, I mean, it's all about being humble, and I don't expect to have top 4, top 6, top 10 money. Like, we do have that benefactor, Matthew Benham, our owner. He's magnificent, lifelong fan. He's invested, untold money into the club. And this is the thing, we have still spent money. I mean, I know we mentioned the 2 signings we picked up from you guys earlier. That was the best part of probably over 50 million, I think, between the 2 of them, give or take. So it's not as if we're, out there desperately, grabbing these crumbs of players, these discarded players from big teams, and just doing our best with them. It's like, we're still scouting.
So you're not Everton, basically.
Or Fulham.
Yeah, exactly. We still have a model, and that model does require investment to work. It requires money. It doesn't. We can't just get these players from League One or the Championship and just give them a pat on the back and hope they can play against Chelsea, for example. It's like, no, we still have to actually, really smartly invest good sums of money, like crazy sums of money for Brentford in players. Now, the difference we have as Brentford, at least in my opinion, is we're not buying a player for this weekend or next weekend or past Christmas. We're investing into a player that will be good for us probably the season after this one for another 5 seasons on, right? And I think it speaks for itself, our recruitment, that the vast majority, the spine of our team that got promoted from the Championship, because we had this ethos in the Championship, the spine of that team is still guiding us into the Premier League now. And honestly, some of the absentees are from injuries. I mean, Josh Da Silva still has every attribute you want from a world-class player, from a player who could play for any team in this division. He's just exceptionally injury-prone. Rico Henry, if he stays fit, comes back rest of the season, I can see him playing for England for many years down the line, and I'd be more surprised if he didn't. But it's all about the injuries at the minute. So what we're doing is we're still spending money. Sure, we don't have an open blank checkbook like Chelsea, but we've seen, right, Macca, we've seen the limitations of that model. There is no chemistry. It's chaos. It's just 11 strangers. We've seen the limitations of that model with Manchester United. You give Ten Hag a blank check. He brings all these players he's played with before. They don't cohere at all. There's no winning mentality from them. There's no identity in the team. And we kind of ignore that, and we push all that kind of, glitz and glamour and all the press that comes with that. And we put that to the side, and we just do our business quietly. And the one time we didn't do our business quietly didn't go very well. We tried to get Brennan Johnson. We tried to prize him from Forest. Obviously when Spurs picked them up, and that was very unusual for us. We did our business in the open. We were seeking this player that Spurs wanted, that someone else wanted, and it blew up in our faces. So we have a different way of doing things in the transfer market. But, the fact that with less money, we're still competing with all the best teams. Yes, we've lost a lot this season, but we've gone toe to toe with every team in the top 4. I think, except for Arsenal so far. It's, the model works. It's just a case we have to make that money stretch as far as we can. And that for me means thinking long term. We're not like Chelsea. We're not plugging gaps every window with 5, 6, 7 players. We're actually buying 2 players that will hopefully be in red and white in 4 years' time. That's our model at the minute.
You should put them on 8-year contracts then.
It would actually, that's actually kind of the model we're going for, which is very ironic.
Let me ask you this then, in terms of rating Chelsea, because you mentioned lack of chemistry with that particular model, and it's definitely more obvious at United than maybe Chelsea, because Chelsea can pull the performances together. I haven't seen a Manchester United performance under Ten Hag in the whole time he was there where they looked like they knew what they were doing. So if you think about your model where it's basically making the best of what you have, how well do you think Maresca has done his job to be able to get performances like he has this season out of 500 players and the cast of Gladiator 2?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's done remarkable. And I think for probably the team and the organization as a whole, I think solid B makes a lot of sense. For him as a manager, I might creep up to an A- because I think I've been super impressed with how he's essentially almost forced this team of strangers to gel. And, as you touched on, Jamie, it's obviously he had to be harsh, right? And maybe too harsh for some players. And he's basically got this Conference League team and he's got this Premier League team. And it's very strange. And it's quite funny to see other teams that you're beating 6-7-0 in the Conference League complaining about it on their Twitter afterwards, saying that Chelsea shouldn't be in this league and it's ridiculous they're playing with us. But nonetheless, I think he's found a model which is, okay, I have this bloated squad. It makes zero sense logistically. We literally can't fit these players in the changing room, right? There's all these hilarious reports where these Chelsea players sat in the hallway and stuff because there's not enough room to get changed. So he's been ruthless. And I think he's picked well from the squad. He's kind of trimming down internally. This is the funny thing. It's not like an external trimming by selling players. You're just kind of relegating them to a different part of the same building. It's very odd, but I do think it's been effective. And when I look at this team that started against Arsenal, and I look at the formation and I look at the players occupying it, I think it's a really exciting team. I think the defense, it's a bit of a weak point-ish at the minute, but you look at Colwell, that's a player who looks really good. Fofana seems pretty assured. Cucurella, post the Euros is a brand new player. I mean, wow, wasn't he amazing for Spain? And he's taken a fair bit of that form into the league. And Gusto's just a great attacking winger with a great cross on him. And you go to midfield, Caicedo, Lavia. The catch here is you're spending so much money on all these players. Eventually it will stick. That's like those 2 players are 150 million, 160 million midfield. It has to work eventually, because if Caicedo didn't work out, then you've got Enzo, right? And maybe he had worked out. So suddenly that's a 300 million midfield. So I guess the point is, if you spend enough money and you have a smart enough manager, which I don't think Pochettino did terribly. I just think he couldn't quite stamp his authority in the changing room. I don't think he was awful. But
no, you're right.
But you look at even the front line, it's like Madueke, Neto, that's 2 exciting wingers. Neto's goal was brilliant. And then you look down the middle, Palmer, I would say probably the hottest property in the entire division. I don't think there's a single player who's probably more exciting right now in world football than Cole Palmer on his best day. And Nicholas Jackson, and you're getting a forward who does seem like a bit of a diamond in the rough, who does seem inconsistent. But if he can click with the wingers and he clicks with Palmer, he scored a few clinical goals this season. I think it was away at West Ham. He just knocked in a couple in the first half. Looked so calm, looked so composed. So I guess my point is the manager has bought a strange squad, a very strange situation, but he's getting the best out of his starting 11. I think that's incredibly impressive.
Let's move on to your team then, Glenn. What do you think your strengths have been? And we kind of limited to players, but I think a team like Brentford, almost the strength could be the manager, almost couldn't, and the coaching staff, because the resources he's working with are less than a lot of other clubs. Even clubs around, like kind of, if you put it into tiers of budgets, like Brentford's tiers, you're probably even working with less. But he's still doing a fantastic job. He's a manager that when Klopp was announced his leaving and he was mentioned as a possible replacement, I would have been all for it. I love his particular brand of football. But what would you say your strengths are this season? Where are your weaknesses? Who has been your impact person? And then what grade would you give yourself? And who's disappointed you the most? at Brentford.
Yeah, so it's been quite fun this season because the strengths and weaknesses are almost diametrically opposed this season. We have two sides of the coin in two specific scenarios. So goals scored, we scored 22 goals this season, second only to Tottenham. Huge strength. We can score goals. Other side of that coin is we can't stop conceding goals, and we haven't had a clean sheet this entire season. Obvious strength, obvious weakness. Once again, top of the coin, obvious strength, our home form. We've won 5 out of the 6 home games we've played. We've looked fantastic, and a vast majority of those goals have been scored at home. We're knocking in 3, 4, 5 goals for fun. It's crazy. You flip the coin. Our away form is shambolic. We've thrown away more points and winning positions than any other team in the league, and we haven't won. We haven't got a single point on the road. We've lost every away game. So it's quite fun to have these questions as a Brentford fan because they're easily answered by just looking at the opposites, right? Great at scoring goals, awful at the back. But even within that, that does actually, there is more to the story than just that. Because when I say we haven't kept a clean sheet, you might just think the goalkeeper and defense has been awful, but that's not necessarily the case. So Nathan Collins, who had a very hard night against England just a few days ago, you
can stop mentioning it. You both of you don't have to keep mentioning that.
He's actually first in the Premier League for shots blocked this season. He's been in the thick of it. He's been the player that we wanted last season. He was a little bit inconsistent last season, but he looks great. He's 6 blocks clear than anyone else. So he is seriously strong at the back. He's also third for aerial duels won and really in the top kind of 20 for clearances and passes. So he is actually a rock at the back. And another defender I'd want to think about when we're thinking highs and lows is Mark Flecken. Now, he had a really tough first season with us. He looked very nervous, error prone. You guys would have seen it, flaps at crosses, the same old, good shot stopper, can't do much else. But that's not true. I mean, we bought him for his passing and being comfortable with the ball at his feet. And this season he's done both. So he's got more saves than anyone else in the league with 55. So we got the most blocks from Collins, the most saves from Flecken. And he's also taken, and this surprised me when I saw this stat earlier, he's taken 100 more touches in his area than any other player. So he's clearly completely composed with the ball at his feet. So although we're conceding every game, the stats themselves aren't actually horrendous. It's just a case of actually holding on, going deep into a match and actually just holding on for that clean sheet. And then when you look at other players who stand out, Brian Mbeumo, second highest goal scorer in the division behind Erling Haaland, and Yohan Wissa, and they've combined for 15 goals, which is a record for any duo in the Premier League. And I think, Jamie, it's Jackson and Palmer who are the duo who are just behind them by a couple of goals. So we have a lot of really exciting combinations, key players here, a lot of great stuff. Honestly, when you say, Maka, when you're asking for like a letdown of a player, I was looking at the squad just before we came on air, and there's nobody that stands out that's been really disappointing. In fact, actually, I've been really positively surprised by a player like Mikael Damsgaard, who I mentioned earlier, who was disappointing in previous seasons and has just emerged as this creative genius. I mean, if anyone watches a Brentford game next couple of weeks, just watch him. Just watch him on the field. Watch what he does. Watch his movement. Watch his first touch. So impressive. Tony, yes, Tony. I tell you what's disappointing was the fee we got for him. That was disappointing, let alone him and his behavior. But I think for me, as there's nobody else that comes to mind, Kevin Schade, he's a young forward. He made his debut for Germany pretty recently. He's another one for the future, but he had a window. Yohan Wissa got injured for a couple of weeks. He's banging in goals before and after his injury, but there are about 3 games where he wasn't available. And that was a great moment for Kevin Schade to come in as a goal scorer, stamp his authority on the team and say, hey, I should be competing with Wissa for a spot. And he just didn't look that confident. And I think it was disappointing because for me, that really solidified his role as a bench player. He had a couple of games to start. He was quite ineffective. He looked very goal shy. And that just felt like a real missed opportunity for me as somebody who likes watching him. He's super fast. I'm sure he'll be scoring goals for us at some point soon. But that was probably a slight disappointment that was a great opportunity for you for a couple of games. And it kind of just drifted him by. But overall, we can score, we can't defend, we can win at home, we can't win away. That's kind of the Brentford season so far.
What would you grade your season right now?
I'd say B+. So many highs and yet so many lows as well. That Fulham game was shocking. The fact we've gone ahead away from home so many times, thinking about that Man City game, thinking about that Tottenham game. You know, we kept scoring these early goals, right? That was the headlines for this, for the moment for a couple of weeks where we scored in the first minute. Great. I love to score early, but you have to hold on and actually turn that goal into a full 90-minute display. And there were just too many times we ran out of steam and we switched off in a way that was very un-Thomas Frank. And the Fulham game was a real shocker. I'm really glad we had the Bournemouth game after that, before the international break, because if I'd have just been thinking about that Fulham defeat for 2 weeks, that would have been really, really miserable. So I'm so glad we had the Bournemouth game to start fresh, play well, score 3 more goals, and bring that momentum into the international break.
Jamie, Chelsea haven't had such a bounce kind of let's get a list of managers and we'll just go through them all, it seemed at times. Do you look at a team like Brentford and then see the value of having a manager who understands what his plan is? And the great thing about Mourinho the first time was he knew what he wanted from his football team, and he had the players to make it happen. Maybe not so much the second time, even though he won trophies, but he just didn't look sure of himself after, I think, when I say Real Madrid, maybe that whole period. But did you look at, somebody like Thomas Frank and go, that's what we need. We need a manager who says, this is how I'm going to do things. These are the types of players I need. Let's stop messing about with the whole thing. And if so, what does that say for a club like Brentford, that they can stick with that manager, they can give that manager that support that maybe Chelsea didn't always lend to their managers?
I really like Brentford as a club, and it makes me think back to kind of 20 years ago when football teams were potentially smaller, when a manager could come in and really control things. Thomas Frank's been there a long time. He knows the club intimately. He knows the fans intimately, and he is essential. Well, maybe he's replaceable, but he feels essential to the way Brentford play and exist. And I don't think a lot of the larger sides in the Premier League, no disrespect to Brentford, are set up that way. And I think that's a bad thing. I loved when Arsene Wenger was the top dog at Arsenal, had a say in everything. Mourinho had a say in everything at Chelsea, sometimes for the worse. Where should the physio stand and not stand, with that little scandal? But it makes me sad a little bit, thinking like that our owners are buying players that they think will work with any manager. We know the manager is not a permanent fixture. He's on a limited contract and it might not work out and we may get rid of him. I wish we had more longevity with our managers and could really, we're buying players on 8-year contracts, and it would be great to have a team build together. And I think that's what Brentford have done. You've seen Tony disappear, and some people who clearly didn't know Brentford as well as Glenn were thinking that might be lights out for Brentford. But the team has not gotten worse and potentially even gotten better without him. You're mid-table 11th, and you are 3 points off third. So it's that tight at the top. And looking at fixtures, the Fulham game is the only game that you probably want back. The other games you've not beaten the teams you probably shouldn't beat realistically, but you have taken care of every team you'd need to take care of to march up the table. And I think we've asked you this before, but you probably wouldn't want this season back so far, right? Heading into Christmas, 3 points off third, like you probably bite our arm off. Yeah, totally. Mackie, you asked me a question. I'd say it makes me miss football of days past. I think football has become such a large game with so much money involved that teams like Chelsea have just moved away from it and become far more corporate, which is disappointing. Brentford feels like more of an intimate club that fans are more involved in, and maybe I should be saying that, but I enjoy watching Brentford and hope they do well.
Let me ask you this quick one, Jamie, before we move on to the fixtures for the weekend.
Yeah.
Imagine the Super League thing happens and like the likes of Liverpool, Arsenal, City, Chelsea, United, Spurs, maybe even Newcastle skedaddle off And now the new English Premier League is everybody else that's left. Where do you think Brentford stand then when the top 6 are not coming to your ground every 3 weeks or whatever?
Well, the top 13 right now are all within a few points, aside from Liverpool, who seem to have taken off like one of Elon Musk's SpaceX rocket ships. I think it would be pretty even, but they would certainly be in the upper echelon. If you take off the top 6, there's no standout team. It would likely be 3 or 4 teams up there vying. They would become the new top 4, top 6, and be replaced. The bottom lot would come up from the Championship, but it would be a competitive league, and it would be engaging. And you see people watch the Championship. I occasionally watch the Championship. It's a great league. A lot of great close games, a lot of goal scoring in the Championship, and I think that would be similar. I'm glad the Super League did not happen, as I think most, if not all, fans are. But I think the depth in the Premier League and the strength in the Premier League is such that it wouldn't disappoint. And Turkish Stallion, Brighton, Villa, West Ham, they would certainly be up there. But other than Villa this season and Brighton when they're not playing against Chelsea, those teams haven't been standout. Villa have taken a step back since they've been in Europe. Last season they were mega, but it's difficult to manage a European campaign and a Premier League campaign. I think Chelsea and Liverpool have seen that. What you need to do is build a B team, and you can play them in the European competition. That joke. I think Brentford are poised for big things. They're not far enough behind that a couple of other teams falter. They could be right up there.
I just realized I think I did not mention Arsenal in that top 6 list, and that wasn't deliberate, but it was telling. That's all I'm gonna say. So let's look at the fixtures coming up for the weekend. We'll talk about the teams that we support. So we'll start with Brentford, who are playing Everton. Yay! The unflushable turd at the most wooden ground in the history of soccer. Glenn, how do you see that game going?
Yeah, it's going to be really tough, actually. So we've only got 1 point against Everton in the last 2 seasons, and we had a really dismal home 3-1 loss to them about this time last year. It was last September. I just think Sean Dyche is one of those managers that is actually really tactically smart against us. And, it's too easy to say he's worked us out, but he's certainly worked out a plan that frustrates us. And we rarely play our best against Everton, home or away, and we found Goodison a very tough place to go. I think it's going to be a really tricky game. Depends, obviously, if Dwight McNeil's fit or not. He is integral to Everton this season, and obviously he's been injured recently. Brathwaite's returned for them, and then obviously withdrew with one of those, soft injuries over the international break. So, yeah, it's tough but even those 2 players, right? I'm not saying they're the players you kind of run scared of. It's just interesting. Everton are struggling so much that if you take away some of the few players that are playing well, then I can see a world in which they crumble. Calvert-Lewin up front hasn't scored in 7 matches. Doesn't look like he can hit a barn door right now. But it would be very Brentford if we are the club he finally breaks this drought against and does knock in a goal. What I would say about Everton is this is, we say must win so often in the Premier League, and it's the biggest of cliches. However, in the 6 games following us, they play Man United, Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea, and Man City. So for Everton, this is a must-win game. It's a huge game for them. So they're going to be under pressure to get a win. It's, Dyche will have been obviously thinking about this the entire international break. And I think my point is they'll give us a really hard game. It's one of those matches like you simulate it 100 times. I can see like the results being 3 different results being pretty much equal. I can see us losing it, winning it, and drawing it. I do think it'll be tough. I'd like to think we might sneak maybe a 2-1 win. What would be really nice would be a clean sheet. But I don't think Goodison is the place historically where we go there and get a clean sheet. I think it's just, I think Everton can see us as a little bit soft. I was on a Brentford podcast this morning talking about this, and we were previewing the game, and some of the co-hosts were saying that, I just think Everton have this feeling that Brentford are a soft southern London team, and we kind of come up here and they can kick us around, which is funny because that's not a identity or reputation we have amongst other teams in the league necessarily. But there's something about Everton that we just really find it hard to basically, be as tough as we need to be. So Yeah, probably both teams scoring, and maybe Brentford sneaking a win would be nice, but it's going to be a real hard work on Saturday morning. I'm not looking forward to it at all.
There'll be no clean sheets at Goodison because they can't afford toilet roll. Give me a score prediction, Glenn.
2-1 Brentford.
Now this is a proper meaty game here, Jamie. Leicester against City, Maresca against the club he won the championship with last season, but it's an entirely different beast right now. It's the Steve Cooper Leicester City, and he did a reasonable job at Forest for a reasonable amount of time, but he also looks like he's fallen asleep halfway whilst standing up halfway through a game every single time. Do you think there's any needle in this game for Maresca, and this is one where he's going to want to win? The Leicester fans don't have any bad blood with him, I don't think.
No,
that's not true. They have bad blood with everybody, but less bad blood than they did have with Rodgers. But it's not the Leicester of Brendan Rodgers finishing 5th twice in a row and winning the FA Cup. It's not the Leicester of Maresca running away with the championship. It's the Steve Cooper Leicester City. Do you hold any fears for this game? Do you think Jamie Vardy, if he's fit to play, is going to be somebody that haunts? Because that guy he's like the Energizer Bunny. I could see him like Stanley Matthews, like playing when he's 48 and scoring.
That's the only thing. I think we are vulnerable defensively, and I think that a clean sheet isn't a given, and especially if and when Jamie Vardy's available to play. Ultimately, I think Leicester are going to know how Chelsea will likely line up, having been Maresca's former employer. That said, Man United made light work of them. Come on. I think it'll probably be cagey to start with. I can see Chelsea winning 2 or 3-0. I think we may ship a goal, but it'd be nice to get a clean sheet. I think Jamie Vardy scores and Chelsea win 3-1, actually. Correction.
And sales of Red Bull go through the roof. The meatiest game, I think, this weekend, City and Spurs. Glenn, where do you see that? Guardiola is apparently just announced, or is about to announce, a 1-year extension that gives that club a little bit of security, but they're also having a wobbly season, and they are 5 points behind Liverpool, where you would expect that to be reversed even at this early stage of the season. Spurs having a wobbly season too. Big Ange having the question his own methods at times, but he's still capable of doing damage. His teams are still capable of hurting teams that want to give it a little bit of space. Is it a foregone conclusion for City to win this, or is there enough imbalance on City and enough desire to do better on Spurs' part that this could be another banana skin for City?
I think when you look at the injury list for Spurs, Van de Ven and Romero are both injured, right? Integral players at the back, and/or get a draw. I think City will overpower them. I would think it would be a score win for City. So I can imagine, obviously this is a game that really suits Son on the break, isn't it? And City have not looked solid at the back either at all. But I do get the sense that at home, celebrating Guardiola, celebrating Pep signing this extension, I reckon there's going to be a bit of a party mood. They've played everywhere. But, Haaland getting a hat-trick for fun. Once again, I don't think this is a fixture that really, or certainly defensively, suits Spurs very well at all. And I would say 3-1 City, a brace for Haaland. I think it will be pretty straightforward, to be honest.
Jamie, what do you think of that one? If trends continue at least for the next 5 games, 6 games, whatever, with Liverpool doing quite well under Slot, there could be a big gap between Liverpool and the rest, which means that Chelsea come into play for second spot. And coming up to Christmas, being in second spot, because everything changes over that January-February period, especially with the 2 extra Champions League games, it could make as you said, there is, even among Liverpool fans, an expectation for the other shoe to drop at some point and for Liverpool to have a down period. At which point, if you're already competing with City in for second spot, you're going to be in that title race for top spot by the end of March. Is this a game, as a Chelsea fan, that you really hope that you can soil yourself by saying you want Spurs to win? Or do you think it's just an inevitability that City go on these runs when we always think they're down and out?
Yeah, I mean, realistically, I think Maresca said we're not competing for the title. Like, dare to believe. Do we believe him? Honestly, I think I agree with Glenn. I think City are going to turn it around at some point. Spurs aren't full strength, and they themselves haven't been fantastic. I could see City winning by a margin here. A game that I am looking at, though, is, sorry to switch gears on you, is Forest Arsenal, another team who've got high title hopes. I could see, I don't know if Forest will win, but I could see Arsenal dropping points there at home to Nottingham Forest. And Arsenal Fan TV would be a good watch if that happens.
So that could be our Tonali's picks. I don't know why he's doing that there. What a weird man he is. But our Tonali's pick. So let's talk about that, Jamie. There's one there, but another one I can see is I could see Ipswich Town beating United. Just because I think it's Amorim's actual first game, isn't it?
Game, wouldn't that be something?
And I don't think he's going to have enough time to imprint any of his ideas, other than a quick sketch. Does anybody agree? Does anybody see another upset in that?
Yes.
Southampton, Liverpool. It should be a foregone conclusion, and it's not the Liverpool of Klopp. It's the very measured. You can have the ball for a bit, but we're not letting you score, and we'll just pop. Salah will do something brilliant at the end to win for us. But Glenn, is there any games there that you look at and you see, you know what, that could be an upset?
Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? There's a lot of even games. So, you're Bournemouth, Brighton's, that's a tricky one because they're very evenly matched. There's a couple of, even Everton, Brentford, it's tough. Everton beating us wouldn't be an upset. They're at home. I mean, part of me thinks it's been such a topsy-turvy season and anyone can beat anyone that I would love to say Southampton just surprising everyone. I think there's been a lot of surprising matches this season where teams who've had their backs to the wall have got results against some of these bigger teams no one was expecting. But I would also argue that would Forest getting a positive result at Arsenal even count as a Tonali's picks, purely because Arsenal are fourth, Forest are fifth, and they're equal on points. So that's the kind of exciting season we have. Actually, Wolves going to Fulham and getting a win there, would be way more statistically shocking if you look at the table, because there's 12 places between them. So this is the kind of the fun we're having this season, whereby on paper 2 years ago, you say Forest getting a result at Arsenal. Yeah, crazy. 5 years ago, 6 years ago, it was FA Cup game. And now you look at the top of the table and actually it wouldn't surprise you if you just looked at the table, but, just understanding the dynamics of this season, Arsenal have to beat Forest. You'd expect them to beat Forest. They have enough in the tank. Like, they need to. I've had people in the chat saying it's a key game, and we know it's a key game. Yeah, I would say I think that United will have too much for Ipswich, and I think they're going to be excited to show off for their new manager. And under Van Nistelrooy, they prove that there's quality in the team. All I would say is I was certain, as were many, many people, bookies included, that Spurs would blow Ipswich away by 3, 4, 5 goals. Solanke hat-trick, Son brace, blah, blah, blah. And look what happened. I mean, we were looking at tonight's picks last week, and I was like, there's no way Spurs are going to get... That's the only reason my heart kind of leans towards the Southampton game. That's the only game on paper where I can't see the team slipping up. Liverpool are going to go to St. Mary's, and they're going to win by 2 or 3 goals. Of course they are. So so maybe I'll just put my money where my mouth is. I'll just say maybe Southampton get a draw, purely because there's been so many thrills this season from the most unexpected places.
Yeah, get off the show, Glenn. So let me just ask you this before we go. let's can it with the international breaks, please, UEFA, so we can actually get to the real football. But Jamie, where do you expect your team to end up at the end of the season now that you've seen 12 games of Maresca, or more with the cups in Europe and all that kind of stuff?
Fourth.
I think, sure. Yeah.
I think Arsenal are a good side. They've just been doing their best impression of Spurs recently. I think they'll get it together. I think we'll be solid for the rest of the year. But we probably have a barren patch in us as well, where we don't score so many and we continue to ship goals. So I think realistically, we could finish second. I think fourth is probably more realistic, but Champions League certainly, which is far better than I would have said at the start of the season.
Glenn, where do you see Brentford by the end of the season? Do you want to be broad and say top half, second half, or lower half, or do you think that the Brentford might put in a challenge for one of those Europa Conference places?
I think with the Europa Conference places, I think there's just so many good teams around us. So, for example, Man United, right, been laughable this season. We've all made jokes about it. They've played really poorly, but they're in 13th place with 15 points. Jamie, you are quite rightly talking about Chelsea hopefully finishing the top four, and I fully agree with you. I would think they might take that fourth place, most likely with Liverpool, City, Arsenal ahead of them. Mm-hmm. But United are only 4 points away from both Arsenal and Chelsea. All they need to do, right, is string together 3-4 wins on the bounce. Other teams will drop points and they start flying up the table. So I guess my point is there are clubs below us who are really dangerous. Bournemouth have looked really good this season. You know, we were, you know, we deserved it, but we had to really work hard to beat them at home. They're an exciting team. Just above us, you know, the two teams above us are Tottenham and Villa. And then above them is Newcastle, Fulham, Brighton, Forest. I guess my point is this is a season where there are so many teams that look seriously good, like Fulham. It pains me to say it. They've looked really solid this season. They've got a really good thing going. Silva looks fired up. They're getting the best out of some players like Jimenez, who've been discarded from other teams. Traore has been discarded. They're Brentford-esque, getting the best out of some players who have basically been let go by the Premier League teams. So to answer your question more directly, I would say 8th to 9th would probably be our ceiling for me at the minute, and I would happily take 10th. So I would like to say just on the cusp of halfway up the table, but in the first half. Top 10, 10th would be really nice, 9th or 10th, but I cannot see a world really this season in which we finish above that, purely because so many teams look exceptionally well drilled. I mean, Brighton are just hanging there at 6th. I haven't watched much of them. They're a good team. They can score goals. They have quality. So I'd be worried if I'm one of the teams who wants to finish in the Champions League, because even Chelsea, Jamie, as I just mentioned, there's a lot of teams who can catch you very, very quickly this season. And that's why it's such an exciting season for fans of the Premier League in general.
Which Liverpool are going to win?
Is that your prediction?
That's my prediction. But I predict that every year, even when we were crap. Just remains to say, number one, thank you, gentlemen. It was a pleasure as always. Jamie, it was good to have a good first show with you. And Glenn, with the more Irish name than I have, it's always a fantastic experience. For everybody else, make sure you are liking and subscribing on the YouTube and on the Facebook and Instagram, and following us on the Patreon for all the good stuff. And we have the Thursday night show tomorrow. Oh, wait, is it Tuesday? It's Tuesday. We have the morning coffee tomorrow on the Thursday night show on Thursday, where we can talk about all things Liverpool then, and possibly Britpop, as is our want on Thursday nights. We'll be back next week, I'm sure, with Timuchin replacing my ugly mush for normal service. And we hope that your results go, for both of you lads, the way you want them to go, as long as it doesn't negatively impact Liverpool. I think that's the fairest thing I can say about the whole thing. But for everybody else, have a good one. Enjoy your weekends. It's Thanksgiving next weekend, so make sure you're emptied and prepared for your starches and turkey and your cranberry sauce, whatever other nonsense they eat over here. But we will see everybody soon again. Peace out. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Glenn. Have a good evening. And we will see you.
Cheers, Glenn. Bye.